Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
On episode 654 of Your Daily Detroit, Fletcher Sharpe comes by to run down the week in sports. I'm Jer Stays, and it's Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, and let's just get started. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always. All right. The Lions showed up for interim coach Coach Bevell, didn't they?
They definitely did. And you normally expect when you get a new coach, the team's going to try a few different things and maybe try a bit harder for the new coach. And it showed out. The Lions beat the Chicago Bears for the first time in 3 years.
Wow.
That's something that was not really talked about. You don't really hear about it in professional football or professional sports as much as you do in college sports. But teams and fan bases like to beat their rivals. And the fact that Matt Patricia had not beaten the Bears, especially when the Bears really haven't been that good, at least offensively these last few years, has been really frustrating. It's always good to beat your rivals. We're 3-1-3, they're 3-1-2, so it's always good to get a win over someone like that. So the fact that Bevell came out in his first game and got a win kind of warms your heart a little bit.
Oh, for sure. And let's not hide the fact that there are still fundamental issues. For most of the game, the Lions defense was not so great. They did show up later, which is a good thing. But the biggest feedback that I seem to sense from the post game and things like that is that there was the joy of playing football again. And I think in a post game interview, Coach Bevell talked about that idea of let's go out there, let's have some fun, let's play the game for the game.
One note that people probably didn't really realize: with this win, the Lions are one game out of the final wild card spot in the NFC.
Oh no,
conference.
Oh, you're one step closer to a tattoo, sir.
Oh, they're not going to make the playoff. I'm not worried about that at all. If it happens, I'll definitely fulfill my side of that bet. But I'm not worried about them making the playoffs at all. They still give up 30 points to one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not really worried about that. They might be able to score a bit better with a better offense, but I'm not really worried about them making the playoffs because they can't defend a U8 Pee Wee squad.
We all know the defense is bad, but on the offensive side, Stafford didn't look bad at all.
They opened up the playbook a little bit. Like I said, you kind of expect that with a new coach. You have all of your playbook. You don't try to reinstall new stuff in your playbook, but maybe they give you 100 plays in a season for you to think about, maybe more. I know in high school they gave us 50 and we had to study all of them, and we really only ran 14, 15 of them, but you do little variations. With a new coach, it's all right, well, now we're going to change things up a bit. Maybe instead of running these flat routes to the outside, maybe you're going to bend them upfield. Maybe we're going to try to get as many vertical yards as possible. And looked at the offense, we're going to try to get as vertical as possible. We're going to try to push the ball. We're trying to do the stuff that, we do. The defense stepped up, too. The Lions were probably going to lose that game, and the defense came through the strip sack near the end and set them up with an easy touchdown.
For sure. Now, I know some people are of the thought that you should just, go for the best draft pick ever and just tank it. But, I think people get more excited about a win than a draft pick. And to be honest, draft picks are not guaranteed.
Honestly, that depends who you ask. If you ask the diehard Lions fan, they want the win. They care about the win, whatever. If you ask one of the more new-aged, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it, one of the new-aged, kind of fan, I guess they're still fans in their own right. They're we want to assemble the best team ever and be good for decades. So if that means we got to lose a game, let's lose a game. Let's lose every game possible. If you left it up to those fans, they would cut every player or put them all in injured reserve and sign fifth level Austrian football league players to come over there and play and then lose every game to ensure they get the number one overall pick. And like you said, it's not guaranteed because you can still have the number one overall pick and your team could draft someone who's very much not a number one overall player, or they could draft a guy who might be great and might just be hurt all the time. It's Russian roulette, I hate to say. You might get a great player, you might get a terrible player. You might be bad again next year and have to tank all over again. In this sport, one player, it's not like basketball, which I don't want to criticize, but one player is not going to fix a 53-man roster. If you can't stop the run, getting one great middle linebacker is not going to fix your problem stopping the run. If you can't complete a pass, getting one offensive tackle is not going to make you complete a pass. If you guys can't run the ball, getting one great running back is not going to fix that. You're still going to have issues. You need to build around that. And if you're still drafting the way the Lions draft for the most part, you're still going to have those issues. It's not, let's just go to the draft and everything's going to be okay. You have to draft properly. You need to sign proper free agents. And hopefully whoever the Lions have as their head coach, whether Bevell stays on next year, whether they get a different coach, whoever it is, hopefully they fix those issues. and talk with the Fords about opening up the purse strings a little bit, because if they don't, then they're still going to be back in the same boat.
Well, and that's the thing. The Lions have been systematically bad. And then in the NFL, where things can reorder pretty quickly, the teams that are consistently good, well, they're systematically good, right? It's not about a specific player. It's about a pipeline and a theory of operation that lifts the whole team up.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on to the Pistons. They've made some moves.
Yeah, the Pistons put out their training camp roster and have tipped their hand to who's going to be starting in what position. The only position that they have not really talked about is shooting guard, but the starting point guard is definitely going to be Killian Hayes, the number 1 draft pick they took this year. Starting small forward is definitely going to be Jeremy Grant, who they devoted a lot of money to out of Denver. His teammate in Denver and now teammate in Detroit, Mason Plumlee, will definitely be the starting center, as he works great in the pick and roll, and he can help teach Killian Hayes, someone who's really good in the pick and roll, how to work. And of course, power forward will be Blake Griffin. As long as he's healthy, he'll always be in the starting position. And having him there will be able to take some pressure off of Killian Hayes, who's a young guy who is talented, but we can run the offense through Blake too if he starts getting pressed. Derrick Rose, as great as his resurgence has been in Detroit, will come off the bench because that's just kind of how it works best for him. It allows him to attack and not have to be. He's still a point guard. He's still going to look to get the ball to other people, but it allows him to just go nose forward, attack the hoop, get points for himself, and open up for everybody else. He doesn't have to then push the ball out. As I said before, the one position that people are worried about that they've not announced really is shooting guard. The options they have are Sadiq Bey, who probably won't start, their draft pick from this year. Rodney Magruder, who I don't really rate as highly as a player. He's been around the NBA for a while, and good for him that he's been able to stay in the NBA and find teams to play on. But he's never really contributed in heavy minutes. So that's a little worrisome. They have LiAngelo Ball, which just no, I'm not even going to entertain that at all. That's not funny to anybody. They have one of last year's players, Svi Mykhailiuk, who played at Kansas, played for the Lakers for a little bit, came to Detroit, showed some 3-point shooting. He's a nice shooter. He just hasn't really been able to shoot as much because his role has been filled by Luke Kennard. With Luke Kennard now in Brooklyn, he should get more chances to shoot. While his shooting is great, his defense is not. So we will see about that. And last, who is kind of a long shot because he's more of a small forward, hometown kid Joshua Jackson, who went to Kansas instead of Michigan State and then went to the Phoenix Suns out of the draft and then kind of bounced around the league for a little bit. He's a nice, long player, decent defender, can get his own bucket, but he's really only played on really bad teams. I'm not saying the Pistons are going to be great, but they're a bit more cohesive than any team he's played for. If he were to start as a shooting guard, they'd be playing the big game. I think he's probably going to be the second or third option off the bench at the small forward. If I had to choose, I probably think it's going to be Svi, just because they need someone who's designated as a shooter in the starting lineup. And everyone who's out there right now is really more of a pick and roll, get the ball, cut to the hoop. They need someone who can keep the defense honest and open so that they can have those lanes to go through.
All right, let's move on to college sports. It was announced Tuesday that the University of Michigan is canceling their game against Ohio State University. This is due to rising COVID-19 cases. This rivalry has been playing every year since 1917. This also might deny Ohio State that 6th game that they need in order to compete for the Big Ten championship, although that might get changed by Big Ten officials.
Jim Harbaugh does not want to play this game. He just doesn't. And I know it's this is our rival. This is a game we look forward to all season. He knows whether he loses a nail biter, whether he loses, by a wide margin, he's not coming back next year. And on the flip side, about having to play 6 games, it'd be the perfect schadenfreude for a Michigan fan to say, you know what, we're not going to play. We'll take the loss, but also you don't get to play either. And it would deprive Ohio State of playing in the Big Ten championship, which would probably deprive them of playing in the national championship.
Well, moving on to Michigan State, and speaking of Ohio State, because, they just took Michigan State to town on Saturday, and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't close. It's almost not remarkable, but yeah, that was something else. And then Michigan State has Penn State this weekend.
Honestly, most Michigan State football fans aren't even focused on Michigan State football anymore. Basketball started, they're like, okay, we already won the game we needed to win this season. We're fine. We knew it was going to happen. I've talked to numerous Michigan State fans, I've talked to numerous Michigan fans, and literally no one in Michigan State of the fandom that I talked to was like, we expected to lose this game. We expected Justin Fields to have, no pun intended, a field day on our defense. And he definitely did. And kudos to him. Talented quarterback. I don't really know what you expect.
If we're focused on Michigan State basketball, let's just talk about Michigan State basketball then. Let's talk about that and then get to U of M basketball and get out the door.
Tom Izzo has his historic first, has his first win over the University of Duke men's basketball team at Cameron Indoors as they beat Duke this past week. Albeit it was a bit different because the Cameron Crazies, which is what Duke's fans call themselves, they were not there at the game, obviously so. But still, a win is a win. They looked pretty good doing it. They had a few issues with making a few easy layups, but that's kind of college basketball. When they wanted to, they hunkered down and played hard, which is good to see. Afterwards, they played Detroit Mercy, who definitely, while they are Titans in name, are definitely not Titans in college basketball anymore, and struggled to pull away from them until the end of the game, which is a little worrisome. But if they get up for the big games and then, get a little bit down for the smaller games, you don't have to really worry that much. It's good to see that Rocket Watts has kind of established himself as a starting point guard, because while everyone in Michigan State loves Foster Loyer, he is not the point guard for big moments, as he has shown. No disrespect to him, but he looks like he's afraid to shoot the ball sometimes, and you can't be afraid to shoot the ball when you're playing against another nationally ranked team.
Right.
Coming up for them, they play Virginia, another nationally ranked team, and it's important because transfer student Joey Hauser, who joined last year, Izzo tried to get him to play. It did not work out. He plays his brother, Sam Hauser, who plays for Virginia. Both of them played for Marquette 2 years ago. Both of them decided to leave. Both of them came to Marquette highly recruited. They're both stretch fours, shooting power forwards, will probably match up against each other. That'll be an interesting thing to watch when they play their next game against Virginia.
Well, let's talk Michigan basketball. We were going to chat about a game against North Carolina State on Wednesday, but the game has been postponed due to COVID-19 concerns. So there's been a schedule switch up. U of M is going to host Toledo instead at 6 p.m. at Chrysler Center. I feel like the schedule is just going to switch around like this, and we're just going to have here's who we play this week.
Yeah, that's kind of how it seems how it's going to be for most college teams, regardless of the sport. If they can't get a game together with who they're supposed to play, they're going to try to find someone closer who has the space to play and who can make the travel or accommodate the travel in such short notice, which is what it kind of looks like here, because North Carolina State is not close to Michigan at all, and Toledo is essentially Michigan, depending on who you ask. So, makes sense. Hopefully, Michigan is still undefeated, and we're going to see how they can kind of bounce back after playing a really, really poor game against Oakland. I know I saw some people online talking about, why isn't Michigan still nationally ranked? They're undefeated. And I'm like, well, they are undefeated. Oakland, who lost to Xavier by 51 points, 51 points in a game, Oakland took them to triple overtime, which is not good. And again, no disrespect to Greg Camp, because he runs a great program out there. They're just not having a good year currently. But 51 points, you should not be triple overtime with that team, especially with all the high recruits that you have.
My guess is that they're not going to go up too much in the rankings either, because the Wolverines haven't played the Rockets since 1983.
No.
This is I feel like this is like a pickup game where your buddy called off and you just called up that one friend that you don't really like to talk to that much.
Kind of. I expect Michigan to win this game. I expect Isaiah Livers to kind of help steer them going up. I expect their freshman center to continue to have the great season he's having. I don't expect for them to beat Toledo unless they beat them 100-1. I don't expect them to shift their rankings very much. If they beat them 100-1, that's a gambling issue. That's not. We need to investigate that immediately, because someone's blowing layups on purpose. That's never going to happen in a game. But if they beat them by a regular score, I don't see them going up. If they lose to Toledo, I don't see them being ranked for a minute. But I honestly don't expect them to lose to Toledo. They're a talented basketball team. They're a bit more balanced than they were last year. They just have to just maintain and try to keep their tempers in check going forward.
Well, Fletcher Sharpe, thank you so much for your insights. As always, you can follow him on Twitter at SaintFDW, and talk soon, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Cheyenne Nocerini for editing this episode. In coming attractions, archaeologist and author Mickey Lyons will join me Friday for a fun chat about the long-standing American tradition of bending the rules. How everything is new again with the pandemic response, especially anti-maskers and all that stuff. It's a good bit of Detroit history as well. And of course, thanks so much to you for listening to Your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll talk soon.